So it's off to the philosophy races once again as we look at some more questions on a philosophy quiz, just to get some insight into some of the views that I hold, if anybody actually cares. Will any of that be worthwhile? Will the questions be coherent? I don't know, but the only way to find out is to keep watching. We're back once again with some philosophical questions on a quiz that I found online. How will I respond? Well, who the hell knows? Of course, what's really important is how you justify these things, and I found, unfortunately, that there are a lot of people out there, even trained philosophers, who don't seem to know how they actually justify any of their positions. It all seems to be a whole lot of fee-fee nonsense, if you know what I mean. So let's go look at a couple more and see how, at least I think, this ought to be done. So we start off with the laws of nature. Some philosophers regard laws of nature as fundamental principles that govern the nature of reality. They explain why things happen in the way that they do. Other philosophers regard laws of nature as mere interpretations of observable phenomena that allows us to make accurate predictions about the world. These professors are skeptical that fundamental principles which explain the regularities of the universe actually exist. And in my opinion, at least, this isn't even a philosophical question. I don't care what philosophers think. And that's one thing that pisses a lot of philosophers off. I don't care what you think just because you label yourself a philosopher. I care what you think if it makes any rational sense. And way too many, they just don't. So the way that I'm going to be reading this is, do we believe that the laws of nature are absolute, or are they just interpretations that we've laid on them based on our own personal observations? And that takes us right back to justified true belief, which I talked about in the last video. How do you justify your positions objectively? The fact that you've never found a black swan, that doesn't mean that there are no black swans. The fact that our observations seem pretty decent, that doesn't mean that they're absolutely correct. In fact, we've been wrong a lot in the past, and we could be wrong right now. It seems to be more about what level of confidence you place on your position, and frankly, it should only be as much confidence as you have data and an eye to historical reality. It's the best that we can do at the moment based on what we know right now and absolutely nothing more. Therefore, I'm going to go with the first, and it makes absolutely no sense to me at all to even consider the second. And the results just show that people are idiots. Now, this is really very common in my experience. We see it in religion all the time. It's people being inordinately impressed with their own intelligence, so to speak, to the point that they only count the hits and completely ignore the misses, because, it makes them happy to think they've got a good beat on things. That doesn't mean that we do, and your emotional state says absolutely nothing about the actual condition of reality. Anyway, the explanation says, Hume famously argued that there are no necessary connections between events. Causation is imaginary. It's a fiction we cannot help but believe in out of habit, because doing so helps us organize our experience of changes in the world. Yeah, but I didn't say that. The question didn't say that. Obviously, there is cause and effect in the observable universe. I don't know where they're going with this one, sorry, but yeah, I'm not buying it. And here's one that I've personally been looking forward to: metaethics. As everyone knows, I'm a moral anti-realist. I did a very large multi-part exploration of moral realism over on my blog, and I'll put a link to the first part in the description if you want to go look at it. And the only people who had the guts to say anything, They ran away the second that it became clear that I didn't accept their fallacious arguments. So let's get through this one because I like this. Metaethics is the branch of philosophy that investigates what morality is, including moral thought, words, and practices. It's an interesting field to debate, as we all have views on what's right and what's wrong. But the problem is, I don't think it's that interesting because everybody I run into on the moral realist side, they seem completely incapable of evaluating from a rationalist viewpoint. It's all purely emotional, and as far as I'm concerned, that is not at all worthwhile. So clearly, I'm going to pick the second option, that morality is purely subjective and a product of cultural and personal belief. If you want to know more about this, I'll link to the first article on my blog in the description, and by all means, go take a look. And I think the results really tell you all you need to know about the quality of thinking of a lot of philosophers. I have yet to find a single one of them who, when I asked for evidence for their ideas, they didn't just run away. They didn't just make excuses and say, well, I can't answer that. No, you have to be able to provide evidence. You need to be able to show that the way objective reality works, that is coherently linked to the ideas that you have in your head. And that's not how any of these people ever work. These people are so busy noodling their navels that they've lost all grasp on objective reality. And that's just sad. This is more evidence that far too many philosophers and philosophy fanboys are only in it for the emotions, at least in my opinion. It makes it look a whole lot like religion, though, doesn't it? And if you think I'm wrong, by all means, feel free to produce evidence that backs your side up. The comments are open. Go right ahead. From all the experience that I've had, which is pretty extensive, they can't. They don't even try because evidence is scary, just like it is to the religious. Somebody, please show me that your beliefs are both true and justified. Go right ahead. Anyway, now the explanation, it really sounds like it's trying to make a bunch of excuses. Maybe you're an empiricist. Yeah, and? Because again, if you follow any other position, back it up for me. Show me that you can actually get to demonstrable reality in your view. I don't care what you feel, I care what you can prove. And let's be honest, I don't think that you can. I think this has been done to death though, and I don't think it really says many good things about a lot of philosophy geeks, so yeah, let's just move on. Question number 9. The mind. Philosophers have often wondered if the states and processes of the mind are identical to states and processes of the brain. While we may use the words mind and brain interchangeably at times, let's look into whether we should. Because the mind and the brain are one, whether you like it or not. When you alter the physical brain, you automatically alter the mind. If the brain is damaged, the mind is damaged too. When the brain dies, there is no evidence of any kind at all that the mind survives. You actually have to prove otherwise, and nobody remotely can. And that's why I'm picking the first option. It doesn't matter what you want to be true. It matters only what you can demonstrate actually is. And of course, that makes me a physicalist. Duh. It's where 100% of the evidence that we actually have at hand points. And this is where I piss off a whole lot of philosophers, because I won't restrict my thinking to just philosophy. I expect philosophy and science to intermingle. And they don't like that. It's why I ask them for evidence, because without evidence, the crap in their heads doesn't automatically become true. And they don't like that, do they? But anyway, we get down to the explanation, which reads, you believe the mind is a physical thing. You probably think everything is physical. If something exists, then it must be part of the physical world. So the mind must be part of the physical world. Some physicalist views postulate that the mind is identical with the brain. Other physicalist views postulate that the mind is functionally related to the brain, like how computer software is functionally realized by computer hardware. According to the second view, the mind and the brain are not identical, but the mind is still physical. You definitely do not believe in a soul. Yeah, because there's no evidence for anything but the physical. There just isn't. We have nothing but the physical reality in which we live. And if you'd like to postulate otherwise, present your evidence. Go ahead. And this is where this starts to look a whole lot like religion. It's a whole lot of, well, it makes me feel good to think that this, and this. I don't care about your feelings. Screw your stupid feelings. Grow up and find evidence. You can't get there without evidence to support you. If you want it to be justified and true, you have to have evidence. You can't just sit there and noodle your navel like a frickin' idiot. I don't give a crap about your emotions. Grow the hell up. On to moral judgment. Philosophers debate the function of moral statements in our language. When we make a claim about what's right and what's wrong, are we making statements that have the potential to be universal, for example, that can be true or false? Or do such claims merely express our feelings? Yeah, except they really don't. I don't care what you think has the potential to be right or wrong. I care what you can demonstrate to objectively be right or wrong, and in fact to even define that right and wrong has any meaning objectively at all. And so far, nobody has come up with a coherent way to get from one to the other. Now, we can have a very long discussion about why things like moral realism are just stupid and inherently indefensible, but I don't even see how somebody could go about backing them up with evidence that we actually currently have at hand. Again, you can't just say that it's true because you really want it to be true. You have to be able to back that up in some objective way. They're doing no better a job than the religious are, because you notice these things are starting to look an awful lot alike. The problem here is that both of these options are valid. Subjective moral judgments do express our beliefs about what we purport to be moral facts. That doesn't mean that they are moral facts. That doesn't mean that they are objectively true. It means we really like the idea, and that doesn't matter. The second is true, though. Our beliefs express our emotions and our desires about supposed moral facts, not that there really are any. Therefore, I'm really unable to pick one because both are true to a degree, and both of them are false to a degree. This is another place that I'm going to fall into the other category. Therefore, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick the first one because it's on top, with the understanding that I don't really agree with either position as written. And here we get a follow-up question, and no, I don't think that there are any moral claims that are true in the sense that they are justified, objectively verifiable facts. They're all opinions, so I'm still going to go with no. And this is kind of the problem, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot in the comments because this always comes up, but this is the problem where I don't think that the moral realists, the people who think that there actually are objective moral truths out there, I don't think they've actually thought this through, because all you have to do is look at the real world in which we live. All you have to do is look at cultures other than your own, and you will see people there who believe things, apparently just as strongly as you do, that are diametrically opposed to the things that you believe. You will see people who say, well, throwing gay people off roofs is A-OK, and in fact it's commanded by God. Well, we don't think that. We think that's morally abhorrent. Well, okay, then where are you getting this objective moral truth from? Because apparently there's some disagreement to that. But these people don't want to talk about that because these people are lost in their own heads. That's a problem, and it's a problem you people need to actually think about and justify. So we finally get to the last screen. This makes me, of course, a cognitivist, which I don't agree with, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's get to the explanation. A cognitivist thinks moral beliefs are about reality, which they are, and can be either true or false. Subjectively speaking, sure. Moral realists are cognitivists, but I'm not a moral realist. They think that some moral beliefs are objectively true, which I don't think. But being a cognitivist doesn't entail having any particular beliefs about what is right or wrong. Even if you think all moral beliefs are false, you are still a cognitivist because you think that moral beliefs can be objectively false. A cognitivist believes moral judgments are meaningful statements about a situation in the world. Yeah, but I don't think any of them are. Now, granted, I did just pick one out of the hat, so I can only blame myself for that. But I don't agree with any of that whatsoever. Everything is inherently subjective because we just made it up because it makes us happy. And I don't give a crap about that. I just don't see how you could ever get to a rational position that any of these things are actually true, or false for that matter. I don't get it, and no one has been able to explain it to me so far. By the way, comments are open. Go ahead and try it for yourself if you want. Moral realists just really like the idea of an objective morality, just like the religious like the idea of a moral reality, because it takes all the pressure off of them. You don't have to think about your own moral positions when they're just sitting there in black and white. You just have to blindly follow them like a frickin' idiot. And if you want to see examples of that, go over to YouTube and watch channels like, I don't know, The Transformed Wife, where you get to see somebody willingly being a slave to her husband because the Bible says so. These people are morons. They really are. And it's not limited to the religious, by the way. And that makes it an inherently lazy position to take. I'm not convinced if asking if moral statements are right or wrong is even coherent. Right or wrong according to who? And make sure you have evidence for that one too. Because if there is a who involved at all, then objectivity goes right out the window. Objectivity, by definition, requires that no mind be involved, period. That's people, that's gods, that's anything. It has to exist beyond all minds. It has to be completely mind independent. Demonstrate any case at all, where this is the case for morals. That would be funny to see, wouldn't it? And this is where we start to have problems. There is a prospective discussion going on at the moment, which may turn into a full-on debate, I don't know, on moral realism. And I keep catching the philosopher on the other side trying to hide behind navel-noodling nonsense when that just doesn't get you anywhere objective. If your position addresses the way that things actually operate in objective reality, then you can't just hide behind syllogisms. You actually have to present evidence for your case. You actually need to be able to justify it in some kind of a demonstrable way. And that's not how philosophy works. All the philosophy in the world won't tell you a thing about a new species of wombat. It is not the right tool for the job at hand. Yet, there are plenty of people out there who are convinced that philosophy answers all questions, when, in effect, it just bamboozles their opponents with BS. The proper response to claims presented with no demonstrable corroboration is, prove it. Prove it. This is why I ask the questions that I do. How do you know that, and how do you back it up? How have you verified it in any objectively demonstrable way to see if what you're claiming is actually correct? And these people can't do that. Philosophy has no independent, objective evidence to present. It's just more and more and more words. none of which can be shown to be true without going beyond philosophy. And that's why the religious love philosophical arguments. It's easy to dazzle people with bullcrap. But what if you don't buy into the bullcrap in the first place? That's a question for you, and one they don't have any answers for. Then they have nothing else that they can say. Far too often, you'll get them going, "But you just don't understand." Yeah, who else says that? The religious, of course. What else is new? Because these people tend to only talk to their supporters, people who are already on their side for emotional reasons. And I think we all know what my take on overt emotionalism is, right? It's a complete waste of time. Anyway, we're going to cut it here because, this could potentially get very long and, why not? So I'll be back with the last part of this and hopefully it might get somewhere useful. I wouldn't be holding my breath, but hey, we'll see, won't we?